The sky above Kilara Prime burned with the orange glow of dying ships. Ambassador Zira pressed her face against the cold window of the underground bunker, watching her beautiful world turn to ash. The peaceful blue oceans that once reflected twin suns now reflected the fires of war. "How many more ships?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Captain Yen, the Kalari defense coordinator, looked at his screens with tired eyes. 17 of our vessels remain. The Vorthak have over 300. Zira closed her eyes. The Kalari had never built weapons of war. They healed the sick, grew food, and shared knowledge with anyone who asked. Their ships carried medicine to distant worlds, not guns to destroy them. Now that peaceful nature would be their death. "The Galactic Council?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Still debating," Yen said with bitter laughter. "Committee 12 wants to form a subcommittee. Committee 7 thinks we should try more diplomatic talks. They have been talking for 6 weeks, while our people die." Outside, another explosion lit the sky. Somewhere in that flash of light, more Kalari had just died. Children who would never grow up. Artists who would never create again. Healers who would never save another life. The Vorthak Empire had come like a plague across the stars. They took whole species and turned them into slaves. They stripped planets bare and left nothing behind but empty rock. 57 worlds had fallen to them. The Galactic Council talked and talked, but did nothing. Zira walked to her communication station. Her hands shook as she activated the long-range transmitter. What she was about to do would end her career. The Council would never forgive her for breaking their precious rules. "Captain, are you familiar with the human homeworld?" she asked. Yen looked confused. "Earth? The Deathworld? Why would you ask about that place?" Humans were the newest members of galactic society. Most species feared them. They came from a world so dangerous that it should not support life. Their planet had storms that could level cities, predators that hunted in packs, and disasters that wiped out entire continents. Yet, humans had not just survived, but thrived. The other species whispered about human wars. Conflicts so brutal that peaceful races could not understand them. Humans killed their own kind by the millions, then somehow found ways to work together again. They were violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. "They have a military," Zira said quietly. "Every species has some form of defense," Yen replied. "But humans, their entire history is war. They fight over everything. Land, resources, ideas, even things they call religion." The Council barely allowed them to join galactic society. Zira's fingers moved over the controls. But they win their wars. Another explosion shook the bunker. Emergency lights flickered as dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere above them, Vorthak soldiers were probably landing. They would search every building, every shelter. The Kalari had nowhere to hide. "The Galactic Council has protocols," Yen said desperately. "We cannot contact individual worlds directly. It violates a dozen treaties." "What treaties?" Zira's voice grew strong with anger. "The Vorthak violated every treaty when they started bombing our hospitals. The Council violated their duty when they chose paperwork over our lives." She activated the transmitter and aimed it toward the edge of the galaxy. Toward a small yellow star with a blue-green planet full of dangerous, violent creatures called humans. "This is Ambassador Zira of Kilara Prime," she began, her voice steady despite her fear. "We are under attack by the Vorthak Empire. Our military is destroyed. Our people are dying. The Galactic Council debates while we burn." She paused, looking out at her burning world. "We have heard that you protect the weak and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Her voice cracked with emotion. "We have nothing to offer you. Our cities are ruins. Our ships are gone. We can only offer our friendship and our gratitude. Please, if there is any mercy in your hearts, Help us. The transmission ended. Zira collapsed into her chair, exhausted. She had just violated every diplomatic rule she had spent her life learning to follow. The Council would expel the Kilari from galactic society, assuming any Kilari survived to care. 3 days passed. The Vorthak pushed deeper into Kilari territory. Refugee camps overflowed with families who had lost everything. Medical stations ran out of supplies. The few remaining Kilari ships fought bravely, but they were no match for Vorthak war machines. Then something strange appeared on the deep space sensors. "Captain," a young Kilari technician called out, his voice confused. "I am detecting multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of our system." Yen rushed to the scanner station. "Vorthak reinforcements?" "No, sir. The signatures are different. Smaller ships, but many of them. Over 200 contacts and more, arriving every minute." Zira felt her heart's racing. "Can you identify them?" The technician worked frantically at his console. "Getting better readings now. The ships they are human, Ambassador. The entire Earth Defense Fleet is jumping into our system." Silence filled the bunker. No one could believe what they were hearing. The Deathworlders had answered their call. "Are you certain?" Zira whispered. "Yes, Ambassador. And they are broadcasting on all frequencies." The technician's voice was full of wonder. "The message is simple. It says, 'Kellery friends, the cavalry is here.'" Zira did not understand the human phrase, but she could hear something in those words. Something that the Galactic Council had never offered her people. Hope. On the view screen, the human fleet spread across space like an avenging army. Their ships were different from other galactic vessels. They were built like weapons, all sharp edges and heavy armor. These were not exploration ships or diplomatic vessels. These were machines designed for war. "What are your orders, Ambassador?" Yen asked. Zira stood straight, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. "Open a channel to the human fleet. It is time to greet our new allies." For the first time since the war began, Ambassador Zira smiled. The Deathworlders had come to save them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of worlds shouted at each other, in a dozen different languages. At the center of it all, Councillor Vex of the Altarian Republic stood with his forearms raised for silence. "Order. We must have order." Vex's voice boomed through the great chamber. "This is exactly what we feared would happen when we allowed the humans into galactic society." On the massive central screen, real-time footage showed human warships gathering near Earth. Huge vessels emerged from orbital shipyards like sleeping giants awakening. Mining ships were being fitted with weapons. Civilian transports loaded with soldiers and equipment. "They are mobilizing their entire fleet," reported Captain Dex of the Thurian Navy. "Our intelligence suggests over 300 vessels will join their attack force." "Attack force?" Councillor May of the Pacifica Union stood with alarm. This was supposed to be a rescue mission. The footage switched to show crowds gathering on Earth. Humans in military uniforms marching through cities. Factories working day and night to produce weapons and supplies. The entire planet seemed to be preparing for war. "Look at them," whispered Ambassador Court of the Gentle Federation. "They are excited about going to fight. What kind of species celebrates violence?" Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Headquarters, studying the tactical displays. Around her, the best military minds of humanity worked with focused intensity. Phone calls came in from every nation on Earth. Ships, supplies, volunteers, anything that could help the war effort. "Status report," Admiral Chen called out. "Fleet assembly proceeding ahead of schedule," reported General Martinez. "Mining Consortium has donated 47 heavy cargo vessels. Civilian transport companies have volunteered their entire fleet. Even the research stations are sending their escort ships. Personnel? Every branch of service has more volunteers than we can process. Marines, Navy, Army, even retired veterans are requesting to return to active duty. We could field an army of 10 million soldiers if we had the transport capacity. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. When humanity had first joined the galactic community, they had been treated like dangerous animals in a zoo. Fascinating to study, but too dangerous to trust. The other species made their fear obvious with polite words and nervous glances. Now those same species were about to learn why humans had survived on a world that should have killed them. "What is our timeline?" she asked. 36 hours until the first wave departs," replied Commander Jackson. "Another 48 hours for the main fleet to finish assembly." Meanwhile, in the Kelari system, the Vorthak Empire was beginning to take notice of the human mobilization. General Thane, Supreme Commander of the Vorthak Invasion Force, stood on the bridge of his flagship watching intelligence reports scroll across his screens. His red eyes glowed with amusement as he read the data. "The humans think they can challenge us?" He laughed, his voice like grinding metal. "These pathetic Deathworlders barely understand space travel. Their largest ships are smaller than our escorts." His aide, Commander Krex, looked less confident. "Sir, our intelligence on human military capability is limited. They have never fought in a major conflict since joining galactic society. Because they are weak." Thane snarled. "Every species tells the same stories. Humans are violent, but primitive. They fight each other because they cannot fight anyone else. One taste of real war against the Vorthak Empire will send them running back to their little planet." On the main screen, footage from human news broadcasts showed the mobilization continuing. Wives kissing husbands goodbye. Children waving at departing soldiers. Cities lit up all night as factories worked to support the war effort. "They seem enthusiastic about this conflict," Krex observed carefully. Thane waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Primitive species always make noise before they are crushed. The humans will learn what every other species has learned. The Vorthak Empire cannot be stopped." Back at the Galactic Council, the emergency session continued through the night. "We must stop this madness," declared Ambassador Zen of the Crystal Collective. "Human military doctrine is completely incompatible with civilized warfare. They will turn the Kelari system into a graveyard." "The humans have not asked for our approval," Councillor Vex replied coldly. "They are acting unilaterally, outside all established protocols." "Because your established protocols have been useless," came a new voice from the gallery. Everyone turned to see Jinwoo Park, the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. He walked down the steps with calm confidence, ignoring the hostile stares from dozens of alien representatives. "Ambassador Park," Councillor Vex said with barely contained anger, "your species has violated every principle of galactic law. You have no right to." "We have every right," Park interrupted. "The right that comes from being willing to act when others only talk. The Kelari asked for help. We said yes. It is that simple." "Simple?" Ambassador Court stood up, his voice shaking. "Your people are preparing for total war. Your broadcasts speak of victory or death. This is not a rescue mission. It is an invasion." Park's expression grew cold. "You are right. This is not a rescue mission anymore. The Kelari needed rescuing 6 weeks ago when you started your committees and debates. Now they need something else. They need the Vorthak Empire to pay for what they have done." A shocked silence filled the chamber. The other species had never heard such direct language from a diplomat. "You cannot be serious," Councillor Vex whispered. "The Vorthak Empire controls 57 star systems. They have the largest military force in this sector of the galaxy. You would risk your entire species for one world?" Park smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Councillor Vex, you still do not understand what makes humans different. We are not risking our species for one world. We are risking our species because it is right." He turned to address the entire council. For 40,000 years, your civilization has chosen safety over justice, comfort over courage. You have built a society where evil is allowed to grow as long as it does not threaten you personally. That philosophy ends today. Humanity has come to the galaxy, and we brought something you had forgotten. We brought the idea that some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. Park began walking toward the exit. Your meeting is over. While you debate, we act. While you talk, we fight. And while you hide behind your laws and protocols, we will show the galaxy what real strength looks like. The council chamber fell silent as the human ambassador departed. On the screens around them, the final preparations of the human war fleet continued. In 12 hours, the Deathworlders would jump to hyperspace. The galaxy was about to change forever. Captain Jin Woo Park stood on the bridge of the UES Seoul, watching the Kilari system grow larger on the main screen. Around him, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 ships of every size and type, all bearing the blue and white flag of Earth. Tactical report, Park ordered. Vorthak fleet detected, replied Lieutenant Kim at the sensor station. 847 vessels in total. They have established orbital control around Kilara Prime. Multiple landing sites on the surface. Park studied the tactical display. The enemy had more ships, bigger guns, and home field advantage. Any rational military commander would retreat and call for reinforcements. But the Kilari did not have time for rational decisions. Communications, open a channel to all ships, Park commanded. This is Admiral Park to all fleet units. Remember why we are here. Those people down there called for help, and we answered. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the innocent. On the surface of Kilara Prime, Ambassador Zira huddled with the other survivors in the ruins of what had been their capital city. The Vorthok soldiers had been systematic in their destruction. Libraries burned. Hospitals were bombed. Art galleries were turned into ammunition depots. Ambassador, called young technician Nemi, his voice excited. The human ships are moving. They are heading straight for the Vorthak fleet. Zira looked at the tactical screen with growing horror. The human formation was breaking apart. Instead of staying together like any sane military force, the ships were spreading out and charging directly at the enemy. Are they insane? Whispered Captain Yen. The Vorthak have 3 times their numbers. On the bridge of the Vorthak flagship, General Thane watched the human approach with growing amusement. Look at them, Krex, he laughed. No formation. No strategy. They are flying directly at us like angry insects. Should we deploy the full fleet? Commander Krex asked. For this rabble? Send the 3rd battle group. That should be enough to swat these Deathworlders back to their primitive world. But as the first human ships entered weapons range, something unexpected happened. Instead of slowing down or trying to maneuver for advantage, they accelerated. The UES Mumbai, a converted mining vessel, flew directly at a Vorthak heavy cruiser. The alien ship opened fire with its main weapons, scoring direct hits on the human vessel. Smoke and fire poured from the Mumbai's hull. Sir, called the Mumbai's captain over the communication channel, we have lost main power and life support is failing. Can you fight? Park responded. Negative, Admiral. But we can ram. Park felt a cold satisfaction in his chest. Do it. The Mumbai's engines flared to maximum power. The dying ship accelerated toward the Vorthok cruiser like a guided missile. The alien captain tried to turn away, but the human ship was too close. The Mumbai smashed into the cruiser's side, both ships vanishing in a massive explosion. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships, damaged beyond repair, turned themselves into weapons. Captains with no ammunition left used their vessels as battering rams. The Vorthak had never faced an enemy that fought this way. What are they doing? General Thane screamed at his tactical officer. Their ships are destroyed. Why do they keep attacking? Sir, I think they value the mission more than their own survival, the officer replied with confusion. On the UES Seoul, Park coordinated the battle while human ships fell around him. Each loss hurt, but each loss also created an opening for the remaining vessels to exploit. Phoenix Squadron. The enemy cruiser is distracted by the ramming attack. Hit their engines now. Copy, Admiral. Phoenix Squadron moving to attack. The human fighters dove through the explosion clouds left by their destroyed comrades. Their weapons were smaller than the Vorthok guns, but they aimed for weak points. Engine exhausts, weapon ports, bridge windows. Meanwhile, the human transport ships began their real mission. While the warships kept the Vorthok fleet busy, converted cargo vessels descended toward Kellara Prime. Their holds were not full of weapons but of something more precious: empty space for refugees. This is Colonel Martinez to all ground units, came a voice over the Kellari communication network. United Earth Marines are landing in Sector 7. All civilians move to the evacuation zones now. Zira could hardly believe what she was hearing. The humans were not just fighting the Vorthok fleet. They were landing troops to rescue civilians while the battle raged overhead. Through her bunker window, she saw her first human beings. They were shorter than Kellari, with dense muscle and scars that spoke of hard lives. They moved through the rubble with weapons ready, checking every corner for Vorthok soldiers. "Ma'am," one of the Marines said to her, his voice gentle, despite the chaos around them. "I am Sergeant Johnson. We are here to get you out." "But the battle," Zira protested. "Your ships are dying up there." "Yes, ma'am," Sergeant Johnson replied simply. "That is what they are supposed to do. That is why we came." The evacuation proceeded with military efficiency. Human soldiers formed protective corridors, while civilians ran to the transport ships. When Vorthok forces tried to interfere, the Marines fought with a brutality that shocked both sides. A Vorthok squad cornered a group of Kellari children in a collapsed school. The alien soldiers raised their weapons, but human Marines appeared from the rubble like deadly shadows. The fight was over in seconds. "How?" whispered one of the Kellari teachers. "How did you move so fast?" "Ma'am," replied Corporal Lee, already moving to secure the next position. "We grew up dodging things that could kill us. Vorthok soldiers are not even close to the worst predator we have faced. When? Are now." In orbit, the battle was reaching its climax. The human fleet was down to less than half strength, but they had achieved something impossible. The massive Vorthok formation was broken and confused. Ships that should have been providing covering fire were dealing with ramming attacks. Commanders who expected civilized warfare were facing an enemy that followed no rules they understood. "Sir," Commander Krex reported to General Thane, his voice tight with fear, "we have lost 43 vessels. The humans have lost over 100, but they keep coming." "How many humans are left?" 167 ships, sir, but they are regrouping for another attack." General Thane stared at the tactical display. Any rational enemy would retreat after losing half their fleet. But the humans were not acting rationally. They were acting like something else. They were acting like creatures that had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them. "Recall all landing forces," Thane ordered. "Concentrate the entire fleet. We end this now." But as he gave the order, new contacts appeared on his sensors. More human ships were dropping out of hyperspace. The second wave had arrived. On the bridge of the UES Seoul, Admiral Park allowed himself a small smile. The first wave had done their job. The civilians were being evacuated, and the Vorthok fleet was out of position. Now, the real fight could begin. The second wave of human ships arrived like an iron storm. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded from the UES Washington, a massive battleship that dwarfed anything the first wave had brought. Behind her came the heavy cruisers, the assault carriers, and the siege ships that Earth had been building in secret. Admiral Chen to Admiral Park, came the communication. The cavalry has arrived. Park smiled grimly from his damaged bridge. Good to see you, Sarah. What is our status? 200 fresh ships, full ammunition, and some new toys from Earth Engineering. The Vorthak are about to learn why you never corner a Deathworlder. On the Vorthak flagship, General Thane watched the human reinforcements deploy with growing unease. These ships were different from the first wave. Larger, more heavily armed, and they moved with purpose that spoke of extensive planning. Sir, Commander Krex reported, we are receiving multiple distress calls from across the Empire. There appears to be widespread rebellion on 17 worlds. What? Thane spun around in shock. How is that possible? The humans, sir. They have been broadcasting on all frequencies. Messages encouraging resistance. Instructions on how to fight back. The slave populations are rising up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. End quote. The tactical display showed the scope of the disaster. Worlds that had been conquered decades ago were suddenly in revolt. Mining colonies were destroying their equipment. Factory worlds had stopped production. Transport ships were being hijacked by their own crews. On the mining world of Zerion, a Kalari slave named Yorin listened to the crackling radio transmission from space. The voice spoke in simple words that any species could understand. This is Admiral Park of the Human Defense Fleet, the message said. To all beings held against their will by the Vorthak Empire, you are not alone. You have the right to be free. You have the right to fight for that freedom. 4-3. The Vorthak Empire. End quote. Today humanity stands with the Kalari. Tomorrow, we will stand with anyone who has the courage to stand for themselves. Freedom is not given. It is taken. It is earned. It is won. Joran looked around at his fellow slaves. They had been worked nearly to death in the mineral extraction sites. Their children had been taken away. Their culture had been forbidden. But now something burned in their eyes, something the Vorthak had tried to crush but never quite managed to destroy. Hope. The humans are right, Joran said quietly. We outnumber the guards 10-1. We know these tunnels better than they do. And we have nothing left to lose. The rebellion began that hour. Similar scenes played out across the Vorthak Empire. On the factory world of Neman, workers began sabotaging the weapons production lines. On the agricultural world of Telos, farmers refused to harvest crops for their oppressors. On the fortress world of Grimhold, even the Vorthak's own subject species began to question their loyalty. The empire that had been built on fear and overwhelming force suddenly found itself fighting enemies on 100 fronts. Back in the Kalari system, the human fleet had established orbital superiority. The Vorthak ships that remained were trapped between the planet and an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Dr. Kim Min-jun worked frantically in the emergency medical station set up in the ruins of Kalara Prime's main hospital. Around him, human medics and Kalari doctors worked side by side to save lives. Doctor, called Nurse Patterson, we have incoming wounded from the latest evacuation run. Kim looked up to see human Marines carrying injured Kalari civilians. But what struck him was how gentle the soldiers were. These warriors who fought like demons against the Vorthak treated the wounded with infinite care. Set them down here, Kim directed. Kalari physiology is similar to human, but their circulatory system requires different pressure levels. Elder Yan, the oldest surviving member of the Kalari Council, watched the human medics work with amazement. Your people, he said to Kim. They are not what we expected. What did you expect? The other species told us humans were savage, that you killed without thinking, that you knew only violence. Kim continued working on a wounded child while he spoke. We do know violence, Elder Yan. We know it better than any species in the galaxy. That is exactly why we know when it is necessary and when it is not. I do not understand. Kim paused in his work to look directly at the Kalari elder. We learned to be violent because our world tried to kill us every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, even our own weather wanted us dead. We had to become dangerous to survive. But we also learned something else. We learned that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. We learned that violence without purpose is just destruction. We learned that the greatest victory is not killing your enemy, but making him your friend. As if to prove his point, a young Vorthak soldier was brought into the medical station. He had been captured during the ground fighting, wounded and expecting to die. The human medics treated his injuries without hesitation. Why? The young Vorthak gasped in confusion. Why do you heal your enemies? Kim looked down at him with sad eyes. Because you are not our enemy. Your leaders are our enemies. You are just a young soldier who was told to follow orders. Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Chen was implementing the final phase of the human battle plan. The surviving Vorthak ships had clustered together for mutual defense, but that just made them easier targets. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast. Execute protocol. 7. The human fleet suddenly changed formation. Instead of attacking the Vorthak ships directly, they began broadcasting surrender terms. Attention, Vorthak forces, Chen's voice carried across all frequencies. Your empire is collapsing. Your slave worlds are in rebellion. Your supply lines are cut. You have two choices: surrender now or be destroyed. General Thane listened to the human offer with rage building in his chest. Surrender? The Vorthak Empire does not surrender. Sir, Commander Krek said quietly, perhaps we should consider... Never, Thane's claws slashed across his aide's face. We are the masters of this galaxy. We do not bow to Deathworlders. But even as he spoke, more reports came in. The rebellion was spreading faster than they could contain it. Entire sectors were declaring independence. Vorthak governors were being overthrown by their own populations. The humans did this. Thane whispered in realization. They did not just attack us. They taught others how to attack us. On the surface, Ambassador Zira watched the last transport ships load with Kalari refugees. The evacuation was nearly complete. Millions of her people were safe, protected by humans who had traveled across the galaxy to help them. Ambassador, Sergeant Johnson approached her with a communication device. Admiral Park wants to speak with you. Park's voice came through clearly. Ambassador Zira, the immediate danger is over. Your people are safe. But now, we need to talk about the future. What do you mean? The Vorthak Empire is finished, but that creates a power vacuum. A lot of species are going to be free for the first time in generations. They are going to need help learning how to protect themselves. Zira felt a chill of understanding. You want us to help build an alliance. Not just us, Park replied. All the species that believe in freedom. All the worlds that want to live in peace without fear. The galaxy needs to change. Ambassador. And that change starts here, today, with what we accomplished together. Looking around at the human soldiers and medics working alongside her people, Zira realized that the Deathworlders had done more than just answer their call for help. They had shown the galaxy a new way forward. 6 months after the Battle of Kilara Prime, Admiral Jinwoo Park stood in the memorial garden on Earth. Around him, thousands of white stones marked the graves of those who had died in the war. Each stone bore a name, a rank, and the same simple inscription: they answered the call. The cost had been terrible. Of the 500 ships that eventually joined the fight, only 200 had returned home. 30,000 humans had died in space. Another 10,000 had fallen on the surface of various worlds as the rebellion spread across the former Vorthak Empire. Admiral, came a soft voice behind him. Park turned to see Ambassador Zira approaching. The Kalari diplomat looked different now. Stronger. Her gentle features were marked by the same determination that Park had seen in human faces during the darkest days of the war. "Ambassador," Park nodded respectfully. "How are the integration talks proceeding?" "Better than expected," Zira replied, stopping beside a memorial stone. 23 worlds have formally requested to join the Terran Liberation Pact. Another 15 are considering membership. The Terran Liberation Pact had been humanity's answer to the chaos left behind by the Vorthak Empire's collapse. Not another empire built on conquest, but an alliance built on mutual defense and shared principles. Any world that committed to protecting the freedom of others could join. And the Galactic Council? Zira's expression grew complicated. They are adjusting to the new reality. The old Galactic Council had been forced to confront the failure of their diplomatic approach. While they debated and formed committees, humanity had liberated an entire sector of space. The moral authority they had claimed for thousands of years was gone, replaced by respect for those willing to fight for their principles. "President Santos is meeting with them today," Park said. "The Council wants to establish new protocols for military intervention. After they spent so much effort trying to stop us," Zira observed with dry humor, "now they want to copy us." Park smiled grimly. "Imitation is the sincerest form of admission that you were wrong." They walked in silence through the memorial garden. Each section represented a different battle from the Liberation War. The first section honored those who died in the initial rescue of Kalara Prime. The largest section remembered the fleet that broke the siege of Zarion. The final section was reserved for the crews who gave their lives in the assault on the Vorthak homeworld itself. That final battle had been the most costly. The Vorthak leadership had refused to surrender, even as their empire crumbled around them. They had turned their homeworld into a fortress and prepared to fight to the last soldier. The humans had given them one final chance to choose peace. They had refused. The Battle of Vorthak Prime lasted 3 days. When it ended, the 1,000-year-old empire was nothing but history and memory. The surviving Vorthak were offered the same choice that humanity offered to all defeated enemies: join the alliance or live in peace on a world of their choosing. Most chose peace. "I have been thinking," Zira said as they reached the center of the memorial. "Oh? Ooh. Every other species I know tries to avoid conflict. We seek diplomatic solutions, economic pressure, anything except direct confrontation. But humans seem to seek out conflict." Park considered this carefully. "We do not seek conflict, Ambassador. We seek resolution. Sometimes those are the same thing." "Explain." "Look around this garden." Park gestured to the memorial stones. "Every person buried here died because they believed some things are worth dying for. Freedom, justice, the protection of the innocent. Other species believe in those things too. Yes, but they believe in them as abstract concepts. Humans believe in them as concrete realities worth bleeding for." Park's voice grew quiet. "We learned that on our world. If you want to live, you must be willing to fight." They reached the memorial wall, where the names of every ship lost in the war were carved into black stone. At the top, in letters of gold, was written the phrase that had become the motto of the Liberation Pact: "Freedom is not free." "And now," Zira asked, "what happens to humanity now that you have won?" Park looked up at the stars visible through Earth's clear blue sky. Somewhere out there, on dozens of worlds, new governments were learning how to protect themselves. Former slaves were building new lives. Children were growing up free. "Now we do the hardest part," he said. "We teach others to be strong enough that they never need us again." "Will that not make humanity irrelevant?" Park laughed. "Ambassador, the goal of any good parent is to raise children who do not need them anymore. The goal of any good teacher is to create students who surpass them. The goal of any good protector is to create a world where protection is no longer needed. A young aide approached them respectfully. Admiral, President Santos is ready for the video conference with the Council. Thank you, Lieutenant. Park turned back to Zira. Join me for this meeting. Ambassador, it is time to discuss the future. They walked together toward the government complex. Behind them, the memorial garden stood in peaceful silence, a reminder of the price that had been paid for the freedom now spreading across the galaxy. In the conference room, President Maria Santos was already in discussion with representatives from across known space. On the main screen, dozens of alien faces looked back with expressions ranging from respect to barely concealed fear. The question before us, President Santos was saying, is simple. Do we build a galaxy based on the rule of law, or do we return to the rule of strength? Councillor Vex, still the most senior member of the Galactic Council, responded carefully. The Terran Liberation Pact has proven very effective at military intervention. Perhaps too effective. Some worlds fear that humanity will become the new Vorthok Empire. With respect, Councillor. Admiral Park interjected as he took his seat. The Vorthok conquered worlds to enslave them. We liberate worlds to free them. Any species that cannot see the difference should examine their own conscience. But how do we know that will not change? Asked Ambassador Court of the Gentle Federation. Power corrupts. History has shown this again and again. You are absolutely right. President Santos agreed. That is why the Liberation Pact includes provisions for any member world to leave at any time. That is why our military forces are under joint command, not human command alone. That is why we are sitting here today, asking for your input instead of simply imposing our will. What about the Vorthok survivors? Asked another representative. What guarantee do we have that they will not rebuild their empire? What? Ambassador Zira spoke for the first time. The guarantee, honored representatives, is that they now live in a galaxy where such rebuilding is impossible. Not because humanity will stop them, but because 100 worlds have learned to stop them. The age of galactic empires is over, added Admiral Park. Any species that tries to conquer others will face not just human resistance, but resistance from every world that values its freedom. The meeting continued for hours, but the outcome was already clear. The galaxy had changed. The old system of passive diplomacy, backed by no consequences, had died in the fires over Kilara Prime. In its place, a new system was emerging. One based on the idea that freedom must be actively defended, not just hoped for. As the conference ended, President Santos offered a final thought. To our new allies, I say this. We did not come to your worlds to rule you. We came to show you that you could rule yourselves. The strength that freed you exists within your own hearts. We were just the mirror that helped you see it. The screen went dark, leaving the humans and Kalari alone in the conference room. And now? Zira asked again. Park looked out the window at the stars, where human ships were already departing for the frontier. New worlds to explore, new species to meet, new friends to protect if they asked for help. Now we go home to our families, he said simply. And if no one calls? Park smiled. Then we will have succeeded beyond our greatest dreams. But even as he spoke, new signals were arriving from the edge of known space. Unknown species, uncharted worlds, and somewhere among them, almost certainly, people who needed help. The Deathworlders would answer those calls too. It was what they did.